from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy Monday. If you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, feel free. Give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, I want to get into a bunch of things tonight, just a few things to catch up on. Just about an hour, 2 hours ago, we learned that the Georgia DA has leaked the contents of her proposed indictment of the 45th president of the United States, Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, and Donald J. Trump. And we are going to dig into that. I just think that there is so much wrong with that, but there's so much wrong in the world. And I don't like to harp on what's wrong. I'd rather focus on solutions and conversations that lead us to the solutions. But sometimes we have to look at the problem, you know, before we can get into how to make things better. And I think sometimes it may not be very clear how we make things better, but in this situation, it's incredibly clear, right? We need new leadership. And not just new leadership, we need new bureaucracy, new bureaucrats, new people within the government. Our government has a problem with being ideological. And lamentably, I think one can be ideological and work in government, because I know I did. And, of course, I bring my worldview to the table wherever I go, and so does everybody else. But I also never lose sight of the job, right? I would never try to use the power of the government in whatever capacity we have to limit how we treat people or to exacerbate how we treat people in a negative way using that same power. That type of weaponization of government, something we see all too often. And some are arguing that that's not even happening, that this is just sore loser, it's right-wing conspiracy, propaganda. You guys are just a bunch of crazy, radical racists, radical traditional Catholics, Christians, conservatives, just off-the-wall Looney Tunes, and you've got a problem with everything. And we're the ones that are right because we're the lawyers, we're the bureaucrats, we're the ones that run the government. We know what makes sense. We know what's best for you. But that's not really the case. And all we have to do is just look around. You tell me if in any part of running your household, right, whether you're a single dad, a single mom, a married dad, a person who doesn't even have children, you tell me if the government is the preferred person when you're in making decisions, if they're the preferred entity or person that's going to give you the advice you need to live your life. Of course not, right? I think President Reagan said it best when he said, we need the government to get off our backs and out of our pockets, right? Who here wouldn't be happier if we didn't have to pay as much tax as we do? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't pay tax at all. I mean, I think income tax is something we could probably do really well with never paying again and maybe go to a flat type of national sales tax or something like that. These are ideas that are worth discussing. But I say all of that to say we've got a problem in our government, and that problem of being ideological has spilled over into a place that for many, many years was free of ideology. And by that I mean the public square, not the public square in so much as opinions and people sharing their thoughts. That's always been a free-for-all. But I'm talking about, in general, the free market, right? And it's a free market, so I'm not trying to control what people say and think and do, because I don't want them to control what I say, think, and do. But it's clear when large corporations embrace this idea of social responsibility. And I guess there should be a degree of social responsibility in so much as they want to do what they want to do socially and do it so responsibly. That's fine. However, we have now, I believe, crossed so many new lines, right? The lines have been crossed on so many different levels. And what I'm getting at is, I'm just a little while ago, somebody sent me a photo of a Skittles package. Now, I know you're thinking, what does that have to do with anything, Rich? Well, I'm going to tell you. This Skittles package was posted, and somebody made commentary on it. And the commentary they put was, what the hell? Skittles is now marketing woke idiocy to children on their candy wrappers? Another person said, this isn't an adult beverage like Bud Light. They warned us they were coming after our kids. Let's make sure they hear our response loud and clear on this one and share this. And again, this is I don't know if this is an actual Skittles package or a concept for one, but it looks like it might be something that's already available. Shareable size Skittles package with, some cartoon characters of kids riding skateboards, sitting down. Very innocuous, no problem there. However, you go to like the chalk writing on the floor of the playground where they're playing, and it's like tic-tac-toe, great smiley face, great little heart, great. Then it says, Black Trans Lives Matter. Then it says, joy is resistance. And there's some other stuff here that I can't make out, but I'll just stick with those two. Literally, the oldest saying in the book, when you're trying to do something easy, is they say, it's like taking candy from a baby. Well, here, the candy that's going to our babies, and we shouldn't really be feeding our kids candy, but again, it's a part of life, right? They'll figure out how to smuggle their contraband. This wrapper, in and of itself, this doesn't offend me, but it alarms me. And it makes me think, why does Skittles need to put Black Trans Lives Matter on a wrapper, a candy wrapper? Now, I'm not saying that Black trans lives don't matter, but I am saying this focus solely on Black trans lives. Why not all trans lives matter, right? And again, why are we having such well, I'm going to call this a political statement, but you can call it a statement on the current affairs of our society. Why? Since when is that something that you put, any hot button issue, when is that something you put on a candy wrapper? It's just not. Right? No kid needs to read that all Black trans lives matter, unless the expectation of the designer of this candy wrapper is to try to sway these children. And again, I'm not saying try to sway them to think that these kids matter. Of course the lives matter. And I think if anything, we should be teaching people that people matter, right? I think we should always teach people that, irrespective of your gender ideology, your racial background, your anything, just your intrinsic humanity is where your value comes from. The fact that you were created by, in my opinion, by God, that is where your value comes from. And even something like that, I would take, I wouldn't really take exception. I probably would. Because, again, it's the same thing. If they were to say, you were created by God, and I would still think, why is Skittles doing this on a candy wrapper? Right? I think, if you just want to put something very genetic, people are important. Great. Be kind to others. Super. These are very, very generic things that aren't going to cause them to lose business. And moreover, try to brainwash someone to something that isn't, or is a hot button issue. This is not for kids. And to me, that's the big point here. This is not for kids. I can't, I don't think I can make it any more clear. I hope I was clear with that. But I want to talk about this a little bit more when we do open phones and throughout the evening. I also want to get into, why is it that they're pushing this in every area? Not just Skittles. You're talking about medical information, right? There's medical information that's on TikTok and other places that some doctors are concerned and saying, this just isn't accurate. This is medical misinformation. So we're going to get to the bottom of that straight ahead with our next guest. And we're going to have several conversations tonight that I think you don't want to miss any of them, because I think they're important. They're germane to what's going on in society today. So kick back, relax, turn up the volume, and keep it locked right here for the next 3 hours till 1 a.m. Eastern. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you guys. And thank you for welcoming me into your homes. Don't go anywhere. Coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. I'm happy to be with you again. Happy Monday. And if you want to join the conversation, it's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And if you guys are anything like me, you know, you spend the day, occasionally scrolling through your social media. I don't have TikTok, but I do enjoy Instagram. And my friends will send me things. And as you know, I've told you many times that in my 30s, I got a diagnosis for ADHD. And it explained a lot of why I did a lot of different things. And ever since then, I tell my friends, because, now I'm like, there's a reason why I was late. They call it time blindness. And I've gotten so much better with that, by the way. But the bottom line is there's a lot of information on all sorts of medical things out there. And, some people are saying the stuff that you might see on TikTok is chock full of misinformation. And I thought, well, this is dangerous, right? Because, if I put out a quote about, I don't know, the 2020 election or anything else, sometimes that'll get a label on it saying this is misinformation. And, Instagram or Facebook will try to censor it. But I never see that on the medical stuff. And this is such an interesting topic to me. So when I saw this, I said, we've got to have Dr. Shahan Chowdhury on. She is the head of Tailored Health. It's a concierge medical practice. And she's with us right now. Dr. Chowdhury, welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being on the late night show with you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, as do the listeners. And I'm just going to share this headline of the article I was looking at. It's in PC Mag. It says doctors are saying that TikTok mental health advice videos are a cesspool of misinformation. Licensed doctors analyzed 500 TikTok videos for a recent study related to ADHD, trauma, depression, bipolar disorder, and more. 83.7 were misleading and almost half were inaccurate. And of course, this is alarming. I mean, I went to a real doctor for my diagnosis, but I'm sure there are people self-diagnosing on this stuff all day going, yep, that's it. That's what I got. How do you know? Dr. TikTok told me. So Dr. Chowdhury, give us your reaction to that.
Well, it kind of harks back to Dr. Google, doesn't it? Where people would kind of Google it up and look at it and stuff like that. So, there's always two sides to every coin. And we're focusing on this conversation about mental health. So, we've all been through the pandemic. We've all experienced something to do with mental health, and realizing how important it is to kind of recognize it, to understand it, to get good advice. And there's many ways of treating things, not just medication, but also lifestyle habits and so on. But, I kind of think there is a pro to this on one side, and then I'll go into the cons on the other side, if that's something you'd like to hear about.
I'd love to.
Okay. So, I mean, we are that generation of sound bites. We are the generation of people who wants to get the headlines and so on. So TikTok is a great way to kind of bring it to the masses, bring it to all of us. And it's great for cooking tips. It's great for, organizational tips. But is it great for, diagnosing things? Well, I don't know. But if there's some generalized information that says, well, look into this and then go see your medical team, whoever that might be. So I think it brings in accessibility to all of us. So it might highlight things that people may not have otherwise thought of, right? It also, I think the big thing about mental health, I don't know, I feel like, the stigma around this whole subject of mood disorders and diagnosis and everything has got a little bit better. People aren't so afraid of talking about it, thinking, oh, you're going to think badly of me. No, I think people are wanting to hear about it because maybe we all have some form of, mental health issues to some degree. But, I like the fact that it's easier to talk about it nowadays and people are willing to discuss it. So I think that's a great thing. It does bring, obviously, lots of different people to the table to talk about it. So you hear all kinds of perspectives. I mean, you talk about actual mental health doctors talking about things to people who have experienced things like you mentioned to yourself, And then there are advocates, and then there's other people. But it's a diverse perspective to all of it. Now, I don't know if this is a pro, but quick tips. I mean, is there quick tips? Maybe there is. Say, for example, you're feeling down. You don't know if it's really depression or if it's a situation, but quick tips to see if you'll perk up, sleep well, eat well, get your exercise, get some fresh air, mix with people. Doesn't work, then you definitely need to seek some help. Maybe that might help. But I think also there's a wide variety of support that may come in the form of TikTok comments and so on. So, and also other people chime in and maybe, hopefully, people are kind and gentle and kind of be supportive with their comments and things. So there's a lot of good things, I think. But you're right. I mean, there's the potential for so many inaccuracies and biases and so on, right? Would you agree that, I mean, that's what
Sure.
we're talking
It's social
about.
media.
It's social media, exactly. You know, sometimes also the way it's designed is the more you want to watch a particular type of topic, the more the algorithm will show you that type of topic.
Right.
Rather than giving you a nice broad spectrum of that topic, maybe. So you've got to kind of, you know, listen to it. Maybe, I mean, to be honest, I would think of it more as entertainment rather than, you know, a hardcore resource. Yeah, exactly. So put it in context. Be aware, be critical that, you know, some things may not sound right. Maybe they're not right. Maybe what is being said is too narrow a field or, you know, highlighting a particular treatment or whatever, but just kind of have an open mind. And you know, I like to think that many of us have some degree of common sense and think about it. So bring that to the table. The other thing is, you know, remember that what works for one person may not work for another. I mean, this is what I spend my day doing, is personalizing and customizing medical information that is specific to a person and not necessarily to a group of people, because we're all made differently, right? And so, you know, that goes for mental health too. We are in a position to personalize the advice, and even to the point of being on the right medication. I don't know if you've ever heard of pharmacogenetics, but it's a way of understanding what your genetic metabolism is willing to do when faced with certain medications. In other words, if you take a certain, say you take, aspirin, we know that some people may react too aggressively against it and it becomes too powerful, whereas other people, it doesn't really work that much and it doesn't have the same effect. So there are blood tests that help us understand that for each individual person. So there's less guessing.
Yeah. Okay, let me just remind everybody who we're on with. We're on with Dr. Shahan Chowdhury. She's a board-certified family physician, and she heads Tailored Health. It's a concierge medical practice. We're talking about the accuracy of medical information that you see on TikTok. When we come back, we're going to dig into that a little more. Stick around. The doctor and I are coming right back, plus your calls and more. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And again, after about 10 hours of hearing testimony and voting on potential charges, the grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, returned some indictments just before 9 p.m. tonight. However, hours earlier, the court clerk's office prematurely posted the potential charges that Trump was facing before they even issued the indictments, which is obviously problematic. We're going to get to that straight ahead. But first, we're going to continue our conversation with our guest, Dr. Shahan Chowdhury, board-certified family physician who is the head of Tailored Health, a concierge medical practice. And we're talking about the misinformation that one can find on TikTok, of all places, medical videos that are out there. And I get them all the time. Like I said, I have ADHD, and I guess it's encouraging. And when I'm looking at the analysis in this report, it says that 54% of the ADHD videos were accurate, whereas, there was a varying degree of inaccuracy and potentially damaging information. And it was the one that had the least, I guess, the highest accuracy. But others, like trauma, for example, videos on trauma were the most inaccurate. And again, that's, of course, alarming. And I don't have a sample of the videos, but I think it's interesting to note that these things are happening and that people are self-diagnosing and things like that. Doc, what I feel is of benefit, and I think you alluded to this in the previous segment, is that there are generational differences, right? I think if you're a Gen Z or millennial, mental health is a commonplace discussion that is stigma-free. Whereas I think if you're Gen X or even baby boomer, you'll hear things like, what do you mean mental health? Just push through it. It's in your head. Move on. They don't, I think, even acknowledge many of these ailments like depression, anxiety, trauma, even attention disorders. So I guess there's a degree of benefit if people in those other age groups or generations can look at this. And, if your parents, for example, can take a look at this and say, oh, wow, look, that's a thing. That's what, my kid was telling me they were going through. I guess there's other people that have it. It kind of normalizes things and provides this degree of comfort. However, when the information is inaccurate, it puts us in a potentially dangerous situation, Doc.
100%. You're absolutely right. It's great to bring it to the masses, to everybody, so that we're not strangers to what is going on and what are the terminologies, right? And it normalizes things and takes away the stigma, like you said. But what I'd like to really emphasize is, if you feel like you're listening to things or you're watching it and go, something's familiar there, maybe that's something else that I should find out more about. Yes, go find out more, but go to someone who knows what they're talking about, someone who's got the right credentials and the experience and also the bedside manner that you can open up and talk to, because, mental health is a very personal thing. And something that I found is you can't just pair a patient with any old mental health specialist. There's got to be, that kind of combination of personalities where you feel comfortable to open up and, bare your soul of what's bothering you, how is it affecting you. So finding the right type of mental health for you is important. So don't give up. If you do go and say you have insurance and you find someone that's in your network and you feel like something's not right, I don't know, well, go find another person if you can, until you find that right person, because, part of addressing mental health is such a multifactorial condition, just as I think many other things are. It's not all about medication. It's also about the therapeutic relationship, the lifestyle habits that you can adopt to improve your ability to manage whatever it is that you're dealing with. So, I think go find out more. But I think, TikTok does serve a purpose, or maybe Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is. It does serve a purpose to bring it to our attention. I know that before the break, we were talking about the negative aspects of TikTok, and I had mentioned, briefly to summarize, that pay attention to what is being said. And if you have that kind of inner voice saying, that doesn't sound right, or that's a bit weird, then, believe your inner voice and do more research. Put it in context of what's happening and who's saying and so on. But also realize that, the information if it's provided by a mental health professional, hopefully it will be a generic form of information that, most people can look at it. It shouldn't be very specific because so many of us are so different. And so we've got to make sure that what is being said is applicable to us. And then, that extends to personalization. But one thing I don't think many people may appreciate, and you brought it up by saying trauma. I'm not a trauma specialist, but I know enough to know that trauma has been described as big T trauma and little t trauma. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? That means there's a huge spectrum of trauma. I think there isn't a soul that hasn't been untouched by some form of trauma, but it doesn't necessarily mean something so drastic and terrible or anything like that, in the sense that, we think about trauma as something abusive, something harmful. So it's important to, I think when other people are putting things on TikTok, please remember there are a lot of people that are carrying a huge burden of big T trauma that they have yet to explore or open that Pandora's box, if you like, with a mental health specialist. So there are things that might trigger people that will, I don't know, it might be a word, a feeling, a picture that might take that particular person back to that point of trauma. I don't know if you recognize when we talk about documentaries or, news segments, there might be a little caption that, says, if you think you're having this problem, please seek help and so on. It's because some people don't realize they're being triggered. I think you had mentioned somewhere about being kind, being thoughtful for people. I think that can never be overemphasized, especially in the medical milieu. And know that, because we're so individualized and so different, sometimes the information that's being discussed on TikTok could be oversimplified. It could be very superficial. And therefore, you really do need to find that professional help that can assess properly and objectively, and then help you work through it, whether it be through talk therapy, which I think is a indispensable part of anybody's therapy, is to talk it out with someone who's not connected to you. You feel open, free to explore ideas, talk about what you've always thought of but never had the guts to talk about. It really is taking that burden off your shoulders that you didn't realize you were carrying all this time, So
makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons. I'll tell you my personal story. I mean, as a physician, time for many of us is very limited, right? But this phone enables us to access a whole world outside. I actually made a conscious effort not to go on Facebook and TikTok because it grabbed my attention and time was sucked up. I could be scrolling down and looking at these things. You
thought it would be 5 minutes and it turned into an hour?
Oh, yes. And when the worst time this hits is at night. That's the time that we really need to, I'm a big proponent of really good quality sleep because after all, many of us make our money through using our brains at work or at school or whatever. And if we don't treat our brains right consistently, then do we ever wonder why we can't do certain things or feel certain ways or anything? And I'm not saying that lack of sleep is the only reason for having mental health problems, but addressing good sleep will only help mental health problems.
Huge point. Doc, I want to pause right here. We're going to take a quick break and come right back. Folks, We're on with Dr. Shahan Chowdhury. We're talking about taking medical advice from TikTok. I say it's just for informational purposes. Keep it like a meme, laugh at it, and take it for what it's worth. Like they tell you in church, chew the meat, spit out the bones, and be buyer beware, right? We're coming right back with Dr. Chowdhury right after this.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And again, we're on with Dr. Shahan Chowdhury, and she is the head of Tailored Health Concierge Medical Practice. She's a board-certified family physician, and we've been discussing the medical misinformation that people get on TikTok and the pros and cons of it, and how that relates to certain people. And Doc, you were telling us a little bit how in your own life, getting off the phone and focusing on your work and all that is something that, I think we all struggle with and we all have to do. And I also think that while there's awareness that can be raised from these things and help to, using this information may help to allay one's fears that other, their family, their parents, or whoever won't understand their position. I think, of course, we should take it with a grain of salt. But I also think there's, I guess part of me thinks you can kind of take somebody who's having a bad day and leave them with the impression that they're, oh my gosh, I am so depressed, I need, medicine. and I think that's the part where it kind of goes awry and we've got to be careful. So what's your advice to people ultimately, in a nutshell, what they should do with getting their medical advice from TikTok?
I think before the break, what you said was take it with a pinch of salt, maybe use it as some entertainment, but also know who's giving you that information. I mean, if it is from a doctor that is practicing in your area or something like that, maybe you can give it a bit more credence, but always follow up with somebody because, did you hear things right? Does it apply to you? It's like you mentioned, in the old days when we used to Google these symptoms and think, oh my gosh, we're dying of cancer, but really we're not. You've got to kind of put it into perspective. But I think we all welcome those questions. Let's sit down and talk about it, and let's explore that. And if everything's fine, everything's fine. If it's not, then that was a great opportunity to seek some help and do something about whatever it is that you're seeking the help for.
Now, I want to get your take on something because I feel like there's been an obvious spike in people, A, legitimately suffering from mental health issues because of the lockdown of the pandemic, and B, I think there was also people that, just even like this week, I think the CDC or the FDA or one or the other approved ivermectin for use with COVID and whatnot. And there was I think a degree, maybe not a high degree, but a degree of skepticism of medical professionals, coming out of COVID, where there was people aren't as trusting. What do you say to that, if at all anything?
Wow. I think the medical profession did take a huge hit in our believability and our credibility. But, it depends how much you have a relationship already. Right. I can only speak to my practice, and that is I specialize in developing that relationship with each of my clients.
That's great.
Whether they're sick or they're not. And there's many reasons why I do that. But, I think the other thing is, that's a very loaded question because I think some people have very legitimate reasons to doubt because one day we're getting one piece of information, another day we're getting another piece of information. And there's so much information out there it's hard to sift it out. But all I can say is when you have a good relationship with your medical team, in my case, my clients and I, we are open about this discussion. Some of them may disagree with me, but there's a healthy respect level on each side. Maybe you may not want to do this, but may I suggest this instead, just to protect yourself. But not only that, I think that's the one thing I want to kind of reiterate, and that is that kindness and thinking about other people. And it's not always about us. It's also about the people that we may not realize who we're contacting with and who they are in contact with. So I always feel like it's kind of, what do I need to do to help not myself only or my family only, but also to my neighbors, to my friends, to people I may not know. And so there are ways of, whether you believe in vaccinations or you don't, or masking or don't, that's not what I'm talking about. I just kind of understanding it in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think you hit the nail on the head with having that relationship, right? I think it's so important when you have a doctor that you can trust and understand, right? And it kind of puts a little bit of the onus on you as the patient. You have to do the homework and then take their advice and do what you want with it, but at least you're taking it from a trusted source versus someone else where you're like, hey, I don't even know you, so I don't know if I trust what you're saying. And I think that's probably the biggest key. Any way you could stick with us for a couple more minutes, Doc?
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. I'm going to take a quick pause. We're going to come back and wrap this up. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And the big takeaway here, get to know your doctor, develop a relationship. Don't let anybody pawn you off on the next provider, because when you have that level of trust, you can have a trusted conversation. And I think relationships are everything. Our guest, Dr. Shahan Chowdhury, she is a board-certified family physician. She heads up Tailored Health. Doc, let everybody know how they could learn more about you, how they can engage with your practice, how they could find you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and you're absolutely right. You can look at my website, which is tailored.health. There's no .com. Tailored.health. It's spelled TAILORED.health. And just all the information is there. You can look at our website, call us, you can send us a note, and we'll reach out to you. But, I specialize in that. That's what I specialize in the relationship, especially with all the... That's
key.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's key. And I love the name that you tailor to their health.
Exactly.
Because I think that ultimately, I was a caregiver to both my parents before they passed away, and they both had very unique needs. And I had to become, an armchair medical expert and WebMD expert, because just to even navigate the healthcare system. And having good relationships and doctors that care like yourself, I think, is ideal. So thank you for the conversation. Godspeed to you and everything with your practice.
Thank you.
You bet. Folks, there's more to come straight ahead. We continue our conversation on the disastrous pullout of Afghanistan. Plus, we're going to get into a little bit more on what's going on with the removal of male and female from public schools. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S at the end, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you Monday night. And our phone number, if you want to join the conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And the Fulton grand jury probe into President Trump has returned with 10 indictments. We'll get into that at the top of the next hour. We also have the Hawaii wildfires claiming, last report I saw, 99 lives. Very unfortunate. And there's a lot of questions about when will the president address the situation, and will he show up? So far, he's said no comment. When asked if you're giving $24 billion to Ukraine, what do you plan to give to Hawaii? He said no comment. And the FEMA administrator saying at this moment the president has no plans to visit Hawaii. Now, I understand it's still ablaze and it's going to be hard to land Air Force One in a fiery island. But I think it would have been more appropriate to say the president plans to land as soon as it's safe. I think it's kind of crazy to just, when people need leadership the most and reassurance from their government saying, hey, we're here. We're here to help. To not say that, I think, is just reckless and irresponsible. But that's that. Then you've got this New Jersey Board of Education story that we talked a little bit about last week, but I want to dig into this because, again, this is not just the New Jersey Board of Education, but many boards of education are going gender neutral and removing the words male and female from all of their documentation. And it just begs the question, why is there an erasure of biological sex? Like, why is this happening? Is this such a pervasive problem that we have boys and girls? I don't understand why that is the case and why we're goading children to abandon their what the left calls gender identity. And I want to get into that discussion a little bit with Karen Straughan. She's a vocal critic of feminism and an advocate for men's rights. She's based out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and she's with us now. Karen Straughan, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rich. I must say, though, I was very surprised that you didn't introduce yourself as my Latinx amigue ex.
No, it's on purpose.
I'm quite offended, sir. Click.
Call the gender, please.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. No. I'm. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
To talk to. It's a pleasure to talk to sane people. So.
Well, thank you. Now, I want to jump into this a little bit because I think, again, there's people out there that are listening now, and again, this audience is pretty big, and it's varied. This is not necessarily, your grandfather's conservative talk, right? A good portion of our audience disagrees with half of the stuff I say, and they let me know. And so I try to have a big national conversation about these issues, being as open-minded as I can be. But I have to tell you, I am really perplexed by things like this, right? I'm a dad. I had two little girls. One's 18 now. The other one's 22, or 18 next month, so she's 17. She's about to be 18. But my point is I've been through kindergarten twice. I've been through first grade twice. I remember what that was like. And there was never any emphasis on them being girls or anything else. It was, yes, boys and girls. It wasn't the focal point of their education. There was no push to socialize them in any way other than to just be kind to the other children in the classroom. And yet I feel like, when you have boards of education, and I happen to be a New Jersey Board of Education certified school board member and started a charter school 9 years ago or so. And so I understand the New Jersey Board of Ed in more ways than most. And I find this just weird. And my gut tells me this is just a political move. people applying pressure, lobbyists applying pressure, special interest groups saying, we need this, and them saying, okay, we'll appease you for the sake of political expediency. But I feel like there's more to it. What say you?
Oh, I don't like, they're saying they need it. I don't think they do. You know, I can understand encouraging people to say, teachers to say, good morning, kindergartners. And I totally, completely, having grown up a tomboy, certified, dyed-in-the-wool tomboy, totally understand the whole idea of, you know, you don't want to put gender expectations on boys and girls who obviously don't necessarily, their interests don't lie in that direction, right? I was into Matchbox cars and Legos. I couldn't have cared less about Barbies, you know, and baby dolls. So, you know, like I completely get that. And I grew up in the 70s when it was, you know, it was like Marlo Thomas, Free to Be You and Me. You know, it was that kind of branch of liberalism where it's just like, well, you just let the kids be who they are within reasonable parameters of being kind to others and being pro-social. And so basically, I don't understand why we can't handle these things the way I handled it with my son when he came home from his first day of, I think it was grade 9, and or second day of grade 9. He says, Mom, there's this kid in my class, and he showed up in a dress yesterday, and I thought it was a gag for the first day of school. But then he showed up in a dress today, and I'm thinking maybe, you know, he's transgender. And I said, I don't know what that kid is, right? But just be nice to him. Don't be mean to him. And if you see anybody picking on him, call them out, right? Just like you always do, because you're a good kid, right? And you don't want people to be mean to each other. Just be kind and be pro-social, right? And you accept people for the weird beings that they are, right? I don't understand why we have to eliminate categories of people in order to actually, what I think what we kind of wanted to do was expand the categories of, you know, citizen, I guess you could say. You know, we included this group and then that group and then women and then, you know, gay marriage, and, you know, we included all of these things, right? And we thought we were just expanding the big tent of people who are us. But it seems like now everybody wants special status. Every little interest group wants to be recognized for their differences, and I honestly don't think that you can create a cohesive society based on group differences. Maybe group differences between us and the aliens, you know, but not group differences between me and the people next door who are of Greek descent, and grow noxious weeds in their flower beds that keep cropping up on my lawn, right? So we have differences, but we are all people. I mean, I think that we can agree on that. And so, like, I don't have a problem with a teacher who decides that she's going to greet her class, good morning, grade 1s, good morning, kindergartners, good morning, whatever, students, you know, children, whatever, right? But getting rid of the categories of male and female seems like it's, there are reasons for, you know, different spaces for boys and girls, different spaces for men and women. Bathrooms would be one of them. Locker rooms would be one of them. Gym classes would be one of them. we do have to acknowledge that boys and girls, men and women, are generally different, and that the existence of exceptions does not disprove the rule.
Well, and I think that's really the crux of it for me is nobody's saying that anybody can be different, but I don't think we should get rid of the established norms for the rule just to accommodate the exception. I think we can always accommodate the exception without, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But that's just
Agreed.
where I'm at, right? Now, let me just
Agreed.
remind everybody who we're on with. Karen Straughan is a critic of feminism and an advocate for men's rights based out of Edmonton, Canada. And we're going to talk a little bit about her background straight ahead, plus her affinity for Matchbox cars when we come back. Don't go anywhere, folks. 833-482-5537 is the phone number. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And I'm looking at an article here. Let me just give you the headline. It's pretty interesting. It says, a stay-at-home dad wanted his toddler son to reject masculine stereotypes and blur gender lines. It got rough for this dad when his boy fell in love with tractors. Now, that's a funny headline, and there's a whole story around it, but it really reminded me of what our guest was just saying, that she, as a young girl, was a tomboy and really liked Matchbox cars. And these are just things kids do, right? Kids like what they like. I had one kid that played with dolls and another one that never liked dolls. She wasn't a tomboy. She just didn't like dolls. She was more artistic and liked to, make her own clothes and that type of thing. So bottom line here is, kids are kids, and this constriction that we're creating by forcing them to start thinking about gender identity at such an early age, I think is a handicap more than it is a benefit. Let's go back to our guest, Karen Straughan. She's out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Karen Straughan, what do you think about that?
Well, I do remember that story, and I remember the dad in that story being quite disappointed that he hadn't been able to program his child to reject masculinity, and but then came around and just learned to love his child anyway, love his son anyway. And I mean, okay, I guess it's a happy ending. I love you just the way you are. But at the same time, why would a man want his son to reject masculinity? And that's really, I think, masculinity's gotten such a bad rap.
Let's talk about that, if you don't mind. Why do you think masculinity is under attack?
Oh, because a bunch of lunatic women were given the keys to the asylum, and a bunch of PhDs and told to go do something with them. So, it basically what you have. This is my beef with feminism, and like a lot of people call it feminist theory. I used to call it feminist hypothesis, but now I can't even give it the status of it being a hypothesis. It's a conjecture that's never been tested. The way science works is you come up with an idea, you come up with a hypothesis, You try and prove it right, and then you try and prove it wrong. And if you prove it right and you can never prove it wrong, then it becomes a theory, right? But nobody ever tried to actually prove the feminist conjecture as to how society works and what men are like and how men and women interact within society. It's basically like a trial in Wonderland, where it's verdict first, trial afterwards, right? So they put men on trial, but then there was never a defense mounted on the part of men. Men have just been yes-deering these feminists like this entire time for the last 150 years or so. And, well, yes, dear, okay, you want the vote? Okay, yes, dear. I mean, even the vote for women, the majority of women, right up almost until the afternoon women got the vote, the majority of women did not want the vote. They didn't want it. They were activists against the vote. They argued against having the vote. They didn't want it. They said it's gonna disturb the relationship between men and women. We trust our fathers, we trust our husbands, we trust our brothers, we trust our sons to make decisions at the voting booth that matter to the entire family, right? That will benefit everyone in their lives, and that it will sow discord between married couples, between daughters and fathers, between mothers and sons. It will sow discord in the family. It will. They were also worried that maybe they would have to pay for their vote like men did.
Now, fast forward, I think it's been 100 years or whatever it's been, to where we are today. Do you feel that is still the case? Do you feel that it was a mistake, that women shouldn't have the right to vote?
Well, I think that women got the right to vote, but they got it very unfairly, because we're only just now starting to litigate the question of whether women should be draftable in case of war. Only just now we've had serious court cases, right? Challenging selective service, saying you have to either include women or get rid of it.
Wow. It's so interesting we got to this at this point, and we only have about 40 seconds to go. And I would love to have pulled on this. That means you earned yourself another visit back where we could explore this a little bit more. But let me remind everybody, we're on with Karen Straughan. She's a rabid anti-feminist, and I definitely will bring you back so we could talk about the women's right to vote. I never looked at it from that perspective. I don't think I agree with it, but historically I think there's some accuracy to it. But by and large, I want my girls to vote, right? But Karen Straughan, let everybody know how they could find you and fight with you on Twitter.
Girl Writes What on the site formerly known as Twitter, and Girl Writes What on YouTube.
Outstanding. Check out our YouTube channel. Karen Straughan, thank you so much. Great conversation. Folks, we're coming back. We're going to talk about a whole lot of Joe Biden's mistakes. Don't go anywhere.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And a Democrat is now calling on Biden to step out of the 2024 race, saying people want to turn the page. During an appearance on NBC's Meet the Press, the congressman said, people want to turn the page. I think it's fair to say, as a Democrat, I adore Joe Biden. He saved this country. He can cement his legacy. And, of course, we're talking about Democrat Congressman Dean Phillips. So Democrats are coming out on the Sunday shows against Biden. Is this a foreshadowing for the series of mistakes that he's made? I would say probably, but I just don't know how much of a sliver within the party will join this congressman in making that same call. We'll see if that continues to grow as we move on. But speaking of Biden's mistakes, one of the, arguably maybe the biggest mistake he's made was the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Not that he did it, but how and when he did it. And it remains to be something that people just continue to just look back on. And we recently, heard from one of the survivors who was in the media, I think a week or two ago, one of the survivors of that bombing where they had where 13 service members were killed. And it's so lamentable when we look at that. And, of course, big shout-out to everybody in uniform. We always appreciate your service. But one of the investigators for the House Foreign Affairs Committee and a former investigative reporter with the Washington Examiner, Jerry Dunleavy, he's focused on the Justice Department, the courts, the intelligence community, national security arena for the last half a decade. He's published a book on this particular topic, and I think it's important that we talk about this, because this is one of those things we can't afford to do this type of mistake again, right? And by we, I mean Biden, but the election of Biden is what led to this. So let's welcome our guest, Jerry Dunleavy. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So you've got this book. You've wrote it with James Hassan. It's called Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought to the End. And I think it's a really great title, because it really kind of tells the story. But there's a lot about this story that we know, but there's a lot that we don't know. And from your perspective as an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee, what can you tell us?
Yeah, so let me just say, I'm an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee, recently hired to do that, and my focus is on Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Chairman McCall is passionate about this issue, and I'm really happy to be diving into this so we can get to the bottom of what happened. I just want to point out that when I'm talking about the book, it's in my personal capacity, but
Sure.
There are a lot of unanswered questions here. I think that just one example of something that we unearthed in the book is you had referenced the testimony from Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, who was the Marine sniper who was grievously wounded in the Abbey Gate bombing. He lost 2 limbs, but he has a pretty powerful story to tell himself because he testified that he got a description of the suicide bomber ahead of the Abbey Gate bombing and believed that he had spotted the bomber in the crowd, asked his commanding officer for permission to take the shot. His commanding officer said that he couldn't take the shot, and when Tyler asked, who can give me permission to do that, his CO didn't know and never got back to him, lost the suicide bomber in the crowd, and obviously the bomb went off. And in the course of our book, we found some other disturbing facts related to the Abbey Gate bombing as well, including testimony from a Pentagon witness who said that U.S. intelligence officers knew that ISIS-K was staging in a hotel about 1.5 miles away from the Kabul airport, and that the U.S. military asked the Taliban to conduct an assault on that hotel. And, of course, the Taliban never did. We also unearthed sworn Pentagon testimony that indicates that the U.S. was tracking ISIS-K locations in Afghanistan ahead of the Abbey Gate bombing, but that the U.S. did not conduct a strike against ISIS-K until after Abbey Gate was attacked by the terrorist group. And so, a lot of pretty disturbing things there, and I have no doubt that there's more to uncover, but I encourage people to check the book out because we found some pretty terrible stuff, and the purpose and point here is to get the truth, get the accountability, and make sure this never happens again.
Yeah, and Jerry Dunleavy, I want to, and as much as you can, I know that you're active in your role as a house investigator, but with respect to the book and what you can share, why would we have a situation where we have a sniper that isn't able to do his job, right? Isn't that the job of a sniper, to take out the bad guy when we find him?
Absolutely. So, I think a lot of this goes back to the original sin, I think, of this portion of Biden's disastrous withdrawal, which was our reliance on the Taliban to provide security at Kabul airport. Now we can track why we ended up putting ourselves in that position back to President Biden's withdrawal announcement, with no plan accompanying it to get Americans out, to get our Afghan allies out, no preparation for an evacuation, especially one of this size and scale, no efforts to keep the Afghan military fighting so that they could keep the Taliban at bay while we did the things that we need to do, including getting our people out, shutting Bagram Air Base down, when it would have been an important strategic position that not only could have helped in an evacuation, but also could have helped us ourselves keep the Taliban from banging down the gates of Kabul and taking the city. Because by the time that we decided to start evacuating our Americans and our Afghan allies, the Taliban had taken the entire country, including Kabul, and including every single piece of the country outside of this tiny airport. And so, a lot of this can be traced back to all of those decisions. Then we're stuck in a position where the U.S. military is relying on the Taliban. And so a lot of confusion about rules of engagement and a lot of terrible things that these Marines had to witness the Taliban doing in front of them. And they weren't allowed to respond. The Taliban beating Americans, the Taliban beating and killing Afghan civilians and our Afghan allies right in front of us. And so this is the position that we put our service members in. Just an impossible position, probably the most impossible position that U.S. troops have been put in, at least in recent memory. And I think that helps to explain it. It doesn't excuse it, but I think it helps explain why there was such confusion and chaos and madness at the airport during the evacuation.
That's really well put. And I remember the scenes of those big planes taking off and people literally trying to grab onto the planes and running after the planes because they were left behind. And it was just heartbreaking to see what happened. It was truly a disaster, a black eye in our history for sure. Folks, we're on with Jerry Dunleavy. He's one of the authors of a new book, Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought to the End. He's also an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and we're going to continue our discussion with him straight ahead. If you want to join the conversation, you have a question, feel free to call 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We are on with Jerry Dunleavy. He's an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he's the author of the new book, Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought to the End. Jerry Dunleavy, before the pause, we were discussing, one of the disasters that were overall part of, I think, one of America's worst moments. What are some of the other instances that you account in the book? Yeah,
well, look, the the United States has an obligation, I think, to American citizens, and also an obligation to the people that fight alongside us and help our service members in the field. And President Biden broke those promises. Biden promised to stay until every American was gotten out, and that was, of course, a complete lie. When the last U.S. plane left Afghanistan on August 30th, 2021, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Americans, very likely in the thousands of Americans, left behind. And there were tens of thousands of Afghan allies, people that were interpreters, helping our service members, sometimes risking their own lives for our service members who were left behind. This is an obligation that we made to people that President Biden broke. And, there are still, to this day, some Americans being held hostage in Afghanistan. And so that is a disaster. Of course, as well, the bombing at Abbey Gate killed 13 U.S. service members, 11 Marines, a Navy corpsman, and an Army officer, and as many as 170 or more Afghans who were trying to get out, making it one of the deadliest days in the history of the 20-year war in Afghanistan. And then, of course, I think that consequences have flowed from this withdrawal as well, including likely giving, the chaos of the U.S. withdrawal and the weakness that the U.S. showed very likely gave, someone like Vladimir Putin the final excuse that he needed to invade Ukraine. And obviously we're dealing with a disastrous war there now. And so, a lot of these mistakes, they have consequences, and no one's been held accountable for them yet from President Biden on down. And I think it's time that accountability comes.
I agree. Now, Jerry Dunleavy, from your perspective, and again, I know you keep your ear to the ground and you're well-researched on this stuff, what are some of the other, I guess, geopolitical impacts that came as an unintended consequence of this disastrous withdrawal?
Sure. Well, of course, we went to Afghanistan because of 9/11. Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11, and the Taliban were harboring them. Harboring Osama bin Laden, refused to hand him over. So this was the point and purpose of the 20-year war. And 2 decades later, pretty much the same members of the Taliban or their sons are the ones that are in charge now. So we're now dealing with, the same Taliban back in charge, and members of Al-Qaeda not just roaming free in Afghanistan and setting up training camps, but some members of the Taliban are now members of Al-Qaeda as well, and those people are in the Taliban government. So you've got that piece of it. Also, like I mentioned, it's very, very clear, and I think we make a very strong case for this in the book. President Biden's weakness throughout 2021, and then combined with the debacle in Afghanistan, very likely what led to Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine, just seeing the U.S. and NATO in shambles and thinking that this was his time to do what he wanted to do for a while. You'll note that he didn't do this during the Trump presidency. He did it under President Biden, and he did it after the debacle in Afghanistan. We also lay out in our book how China immediately used this event to ratchet up its pressure on Taiwan. China likes to call this the Kabul moment. And they sort of just portray this as the moment where the U.S. showed its true colors, right? That we can't win, and that we'll leave our allies behind. And that's sort of the propaganda message that they began drilling into the Taiwanese, that the U.S. isn't going to be here. we're going to invade, and the U.S. isn't going to stop us. And so, I think that the world has gotten more dangerous, and we're dealing with a major war on the European continent now. That's a war that didn't happen until after this Afghanistan debacle. And so I kind of think that the timeline and the facts speak for themselves.
Yeah. Folks, Jerry Dunleavy's written a fantastic book. We're going to continue discussing it. And again, your calls and questions are coming up at the top of the next hour. Of course, Open Phone America, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
What's up, America? I am Rich Valdez. We're on with Jerry Dunleavy. He's an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He's the author of Kabul, brand new book. You want to get that. Let's quickly go to one of our callers, Matt. He's near Morehead City, North Carolina, on WTKF. Matt, quickly, go right ahead.
Hello, Rich. I'd like to ask Jerry, is that not the definition of treason? $83 billion of our military equipment, an air base, and 13 American service members killed. What does Jerry think?
Thank you, Matt. Jerry Dunleavy, go right ahead.
Well, I don't know if it fits the definition of treason, but I definitely think that it fits the definition of dereliction of duty. President Biden did not do his duty as commander-in-chief. He put Americans' lives at risk. He left Americans behind under the control of a Taliban-led government. He set a withdrawal date for the 20th anniversary of September 11th, which happened to fall right in the middle of Afghan fighting season. He misled about the size and strength of the Afghan military. He ignored the reality on the ground. He allowed us to be put in a position where we were relying on our Taliban enemy for security. He did not make sure that there were clear rules of engagement. And 13 American service members lost their lives. 200 Afghan civilians were killed. Dozens of American service members were wounded, I want people to keep in mind, as well as, including a Marine, Tyler Vargas Andrews, who lost 2 limbs, another service member who is a female service member who's paralyzed.
Wow.
So this is a dereliction of duty, to be sure.
Folks, Jerry Dunleavy is the author of Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought to the End. Jerry Dunleavy, tell everybody how they can get a copy of the book quickly.
Every place where books are sold, but you can go right to Amazon and buy it. Probably the easiest way, and I encourage everyone to do so. It goes on sale tomorrow.
All right, folks, find him on Twitter at Jerry Dunleavy. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. And, folks, there is more to come straight ahead. It's Open Phone America. I'm looking forward to speaking with each of you. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, by the way, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be with you here. Hour number 3, we call it Open Phone America, right? That was a name given by Larry King the year I was born. Larry King maintained that tradition on this program. The late, great Jim Bohannon maintained that tradition on this program. And I, yours truly, Rich Valdez, am going to maintain that tradition on this program as well. You get to call in from anywhere in America. We'll talk about the news of the day or whatever you want to talk about. I'm open for that. If you disagree, you get moved to the front of the line. And again, the phone number to call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. I want to start with a story that broke just about 2 hours ago, maybe 3 hours ago now. The indictment of Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, the 45th president of these United States, Donald J. Trump. He was indicted along with 18 of his allies. Now, these allies happen to be, several of them, his lawyers. Just think about that. The last time that somebody, and again, I'm not saying it's never happened, but just think of the last time. Well, I don't think there's been a politician that's ever been indicted with 18 of his lawyers. That's probably a first in American history. But I know they do that to gangsters sometimes, but I've never heard of that happening to a politician. But that's what's going on. Trump and 18 of his allies were indicted Monday night by a Georgia grand jury in connection with his efforts to address the 2020 election results in the Peach State. Also charged in the indictment, which were signed by Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney, were former Trump attorneys Rudy Giuliani, who's been on this program, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, and Kenneth Chesebro. Or is it Cheesebro? If it's Cheesebro, man, that's tough. But I guess that's kind of cool, Cheesebro. Anyway, also accused were former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, ex-Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, he's also been on this program, and Trump 2020 Election Day Director of Operations, Michael Roman. Trump, who's now 77, faces 13 counts in the case, matching the docket prematurely posted by the Fulton County Superior Court's website around noon. And that's also, that was the biggest story until the indictment came out, that these people were still voting on whether we're going to return an indictment or not, and that was completed by 9 p.m., just after 9 p.m. Monday night, tonight. Yet at noon, they already had the indictment posted on their website, meaning they knew exactly what these charges were going to be and what it was going to do, and they say that was just a mistake, that they put it out so early before the actual jury could vote. I mean, if that isn't clear indication of how they want to go with this, it's like, do you really get your day in court? Or do you not? Because they're already, hitting enter and post 9 hours early. The charges against the former president include violation of Georgia's anti-racketeering law. How about that? So he says, find me 11 votes, do 11,000 votes, whatever it was. We have to get to the bottom of this. This was not a good election. This was a stolen election. Right? He's arguing with them, which is not illegal, the last I heard. But now he's getting charged with anti-racketeering, conspiracy, false statements, and asking a public official to violate their oath of office. Ay, bendito. All 19 defendants are charged with Georgia's equivalent of a federal RICO statute. So a statewide organized crime statute is what they're using to prosecute Trump and his lawyers for trying to get to the bottom of what they considered to be a fake, phony, fraud election. Whether it was fake, phony, or fraud or not, I didn't know you get put in jail if you question the outcome of an election. But that's what they're attempting to do. Now, this can be used against any group of individuals that they feel used criminal means to obtain their objective. Fascinating. This is fascinating to me. I've never seen such a thing. I mean, just imagine. You don't have to imagine. It's playing out in real time. The defendants and 30 unindicted co-conspirators. I'd love to see the names of those co-conspirators, and others unknown to the grand jury, constituted a criminal organization whose members and associates engaged in false statements and writings, impersonating a public officer, forgery, filing false documents, influencing witnesses, computer theft, computer trespass, computer invasion of privacy, conspiracy to defraud the state of Georgia, acts involving theft and perjury, all were included in the 98-page indictment. Wow. I mean, it's like, this is crazy, right? This is so overboard, right? I don't see how this works in any court, but we will see. Maybe they'll get those same grand jurors to be the jury here, and they'll come back with the guilty verdict that they're looking for. But in reality, I just can't believe it. I mean, the things that they're coming, RICO statute. I mean, really, for an election? Unbelievable. The grand jury had been expected to sit Monday and Tuesday, but pushed through its agenda quicker than expected, with at least one witness, independent journalist George Cheedy, tweeting that he was initially told to come to the courthouse on Tuesday and then was called Monday afternoon and dismissed without having to testify. The Georgia indictment is the fourth indictment brought against Trump in approximately 4.5 months. All of this is happening while he's campaigning for president. Mind you, all of these people had 2.5 years when he left office at the end of at the beginning of 21, right? Leaving in 2020 and then doing the handoff in January of 21. They had all of this time to come after him for January 6th if they wanted to come after him for Georgia, to come after him for the New York case. I mean, every single allegation against him could have been brought against him before he announced to run in November of 22. But nope, they didn't do nada, not a damn thing. They decide to wait until after he announces for president, and then a couple of months into his campaign, where he's leading by 40 points in almost every single poll for the Republican nomination for president of the United States. Now they decide to bring these indictments, 4 indictments from all over the place. The Georgia indictment being the fourth. Of course, in March, he was charged by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg with 34 counts of business fraud for allegedly falsifying records to hide the reimbursement of a payment made by his lawyer for a non-disclosure agreement. And that being listed as a legal expense instead of being listed as a campaign expense, which they allege was a campaign expense, because you would never pay a porn star who admitted that she lied in doing so, but she said that she'd messed around with Donald Trump. She later admitted under oath that that was a lie, but she still said it. And because she said it and he paid her off to be quiet, now all of a sudden this is a campaign expenditure, not one to protect his family, his public reputation, his business reputation. No, none of that. This was a campaign expense. I mean, the things that they come up with to make these indictments, absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, John Eastman, Professor John Eastman, he's literally the dean of a law school. He's also one of the indicted. I mean, this guy's a legal genius. But here is Jeffrey Clark, who was a former acting assistant attorney of the civil division and another division at the same time. He was a guest on this program, I don't know, a month ago, maybe. He's also in this indictment. And, of course, in June, Special Counsel Jack Smith. Again, now this is a guy who works for the Department of Justice at The Hague and doing war crimes prosecutions. They bring this guy in to launch the federal indictment, and he put 36 counts of keeping classified national security information at the Mar-a-Lago resort where Trump lives, and was been chastised all the way through, right? They took personal papers of his, medical documents. The judge said they had to give it back. I mean, we've heard from a number of people on this program where they've former FBI agents who've testified in Congress and then reiterated that testimony on this program. We've heard from others that worked in the criminal division of the Department of Justice that said, like former chief who was on this show and said, we would never have brought this case. This is totally a political prosecution to smear Donald Trump. But this is what's happening, and here we are with indictment number 4. Trump himself said that if he gets indicted a 4th time, he'll probably cinch the Republican nomination and lock it all up. So at least he's got a good demeanor about it, and he has a statement that he's put out on Truth Social. I'm going to get to that momentarily, as well as your calls. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number, 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833 Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
Again, President Trump has been indicted yet again. I don't know how many programs are talking about that right now because it happened only a few hours ago. And not everybody in this time slot is live, but we are, and you're welcome to give us a call, 866. I'll give you the old number. Yeah, 866-505-4626, 866-50-JIMBO. That legacy line will live on forever here. Of course, 833-4-Valdez is open as well. And I want to just give you a quick tidbit of what Trump put out in his statement. He said, radical Democrat Fani Willis is campaigning and fundraising on her bogus indictments of President Trump. And he claims that she is a Democrat activist, which I would likely agree with. And I don't think whether you're a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, apolitical person that doesn't care about politics and just likes music, it doesn't matter who you are. The reality of understanding a simple fact that the FBI has long had a tradition of not bringing indictments against political candidates because it would interfere in an election for decades now. And this is exactly what we're seeing. Not one indictment, not two, but four. You got state indictments, federal indictments. You got all sorts of indictments. This is literally designed to slow down Trump. They could have done it way before, and they didn't. They're doing this as part of their political operation to defeat Trump. And I just find it astounding that people agree with this just because they don't like Trump. I don't care who you like. Nobody should go through this, right? They should have gone to him before or go after. As soon as he wins or loses, go after him and say, look, whenever your last day in the White House is or whatever, we're locking you up. We're gonna do this thing. Or way before would have been ideal, right? The day everybody was saying the walls are closing in, they're gonna walk Trump out of the White House in handcuffs. He left in his helicopter. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He's been all over the place. For 2 years, he was running around. Nothing. They wait till he runs to try to stop him. If that's not a telltale sign of political interference, I don't know what is. Anyway, she has a history of fundraising. In 2021, she endorsed and fundraised for a Democrat political opponent of a Republican senator in Georgia who was a target of her investigation. And that was the Charles Bailey campaign. So this is just crazy. Now, she's got a history of this, and he points it all out in his statement. Let me see if I can find it on Truth. Maybe I'll share it on Truth Social, at Rich Valdez with an S, by the way, on Truth Social and all the other social media. But I want to get to your calls. I know there's a lot of people calling from a lot of places that have some opinions on this. We've got calls from Michigan, from Iowa, or listening in Iowa through their computer, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. But they're in Brooklyn, New York. We've got Chicago, near Kankakee, Illinois. And let's go to Alex, who's listening on WFAS in New York City. Alex, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, thanks so much for taking the call. And you mentioned that, on the website it showed up that they were going to indict President Trump even before the grand jury, voted on indicting him. And I think the media's response to that is going to be that they were expecting that to be the result, and they didn't, pressure the jury to vote any certain way. But you also mentioned that there was someone that was going to be a witness tomorrow, Tuesday, and after this leak came out, they called him in today because they wanted to speed it up, and that shows you that they weren't indicting President Trump today. And I think what's at play here is that they were going to drag this out, I think until like Friday or next week. Because next week you got the primary debate, the first one,
right?
And there is no Democratic primary debate, and so a lot of Democrats would be watching the Fox News debate, and they would actually get to hear some candidates talking about some of the issues facing the country, and not just Trump. And so what they're doing by bringing this big story to the table is they're going to turn away from that, and they're going to make twist the story so
Sure.
that Democratic voters should only hear about Trump as opposed to the actual issues facing
Plus,
the country.
and you're right. And I think all of his opponents in the primary, some of them don't see themselves as opponents, but they are. They're all vying for the same Republican nomination. It's going to be the Trump indictment hour at the debate rather than the American people really hear, at least the Republicans, who are wanting to hear from candidates on varying issues. That's going to continue to dominate the debate. And I think, again, who's the loser here? You, me, whomever wanted to hear from that. And again, while it's a Republican primary debate, I think people are going to watch that and say, look, this guy could potentially win whoever, whether it's DeSantis or anybody else, Larry Elder. There's a bunch of people. I don't know if Elder is going to be in that particular debate, but my point is, whichever Republican candidate is there, the American people have they have an expectation of hearing what these candidates say so they can be informed in their decision making on which candidate they're going to choose. And the fact that the government, by way of this lawfare that they're using against Trump, is influencing the media to influence now a political debate, it is just egregious in my opinion, Alex.
Yep, I agree 100%. I also wanted to say about, if you heard, I heard a little audio of this person that gave the press conference. She was so high on adrenaline. I was like, what the hell is going on with you? This is not so exciting that you're getting a president indicted. She was yelling away. But you got Democratic voters that they don't give a damn. Even if you explain to them that Trump did nothing wrong and this is, corruption of the justice system, they'll say, well, Trump is a monster. Everything is fair game with him. But they're trying to target independent voters by bringing all these many indictments against President Trump because you only have one or two people look into the indictments. Once you bring four, and I think they'll bring even more because they're making up stuff like free speech is not allowed, then people are like, oh, he's just one big criminal, and they don't get to look into every single one of the indictments. But you know what? There is more fraud there's more evidence of election fraud than there is of Trump trying to fabricate votes in this election. I mean, and why would he reach out to a Republican Secretary of State asking him to fabricate votes when Republicans aren't so good with shenanigans? If I was him and I wanted to get fabricated votes, I'd ask some Democrats to do that for me.
That's a good point, Alex.
Against him, with no evidence, I'd say bring a case against the Democrats for stealing the election where there's a little more evidence. There's not enough evidence, okay, to say that the election was fully stolen, but there's absolute evidence, clear evidence, there was some form of election interference and election fraud. So if you're bringing it against him, bring it against the Democrats as well for stealing the election.
Great point. A great point, Alex in Brooklyn. Thank you for the call. And, this reminds me of the first indictment they brought against Trump that ended up getting dropped out of Georgia, where the woman who was the spokesperson for the grand jury went on TV and she was like, yeah, we were so excited to indict him or whatever she said. I'm paraphrasing, but that ultimately didn't amount to anything. It was just so funny, honestly. It was laughable. Anyway, we're going to continue with all of the stories we're talking about tonight with your calls and more straight ahead. We got calls from all over the country. 833-4-VALDEZ is the number, 833-482-5337. Don't go anywhere.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Is there any chance you take a plea deal in Georgia?
We did nothing wrong, and we don't ever take a plea deal.
Yes, sir.
We don't take plea deals. It's a wise guy question.
Are you going to change this?
Mr. Wise Guy. We don't take plea deals because I did nothing wrong. It's called election interference. You know what that is? Because these indictments are brought out by Biden, who can't even put two sentences together. This is Joe Biden, because he can't win the election by himself. He can't win the election based on votes. So what they did is they got the Attorney General to do it. And then you see how stupid they acted yesterday with the appointment of the special counsel. We call it special counsel. And what a crazy thing that was. And it's being laughed at all over the world. The fact is that we have a country that's in serious trouble. We have a country that's in major decline. I don't mean decline, I mean major decline. And we're going to straighten it out. This group and a lot of people just like this group, we're going to straighten it out and we're going to make America great
wise guy. I hope you're able to hear that Trump Saturday rather in Iowa at the fair, and he couldn't have been more clear. Again, that's Trump. He tells the reporter he's a wise guy. He laid out his answer. He said, we're not taking a plea deal in Georgia. We don't do that. The country's in trouble. Biden did it. It's election interference. And he calls him a wise guy again in true Trumpian fashion. And I love that. I want to continue with your calls because I know you guys have been patiently waiting. Let us go here. Where do we go now? Let's see, Jorge in Brooklyn, New York, listening on KMA in Iowa, streaming. Go right ahead.
Rich, I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to speak to you because I enjoy your show because of its informativeness. And I find it shocking that Fulton, the county in Georgia, could possibly do what it did because the type of thing that they are accusing the former
Jorge, speak up a little bit because it's hard to hear you. I don't know if you're too close to the phone, but I want to make sure everybody in America that's listening can hear you well. Go right ahead.
Okay, I can do that. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it sounds great.
I'm a little louder, a little clearer. All right, I'll do that for you. What I wanted to say was that I find it shocking that in Fulton, in Georgia, that grand jury would return the kind of problems that are going to have to face jury in court there.
Yeah, the 13 counts in the indictment.
Activities that regard politics, because, the type of thing that they're saying that the former president did are kind of things that really don't have no effect of kind that they suggest that they have had. Because what he did was just merely inquire as to what the possibility of the consequences of a false vote were. That kind of thing was resolved back in 1876 in the Hayes election. And there were kind of all kinds of things that went on that were troublesome.
Yeah, it was election fraud. That's what went on. It was ballot stuffing. I remember that. I did a whole show on that once, filling in for the great one, Mark Levin. And we talked about Samuel Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes. And they used, believe it or not, it's a very old scheme. That was back in 1876, and you're right about that. They used mail-in ballots for soldiers who were fighting that were deployed. And these mail-in ballots were forged, and they swung one way or the other, and they came up with this crazy scheme to send it to Congress, and they made this agreement, and ultimately it went the way it went. But the bottom line was that the result of this is where the Electoral Count Act came from. They came up with that after the fact. And just a tidbit, if you ever want to check this out on Mark Levin's website, the day I don't know what day I did it, but I'm sure you could find it if you search for it. But Rutherford B. Hayes's great-granddaughter was listening to the show, and she called in and was so thankful that I shared that story and read some of the history on it. So I'm glad that you know that, and you're right, that 1876 election was a really interesting thing. And what do you think about them being able to prove Trump guilty of conspiracy, Jorge?
I think that if they were able to actually do that it would just be a political motivated judgment, because what other reason would they have to be doing what they're doing to someone who has had the standing that he has had? And now they want to trouble him with a lot of papers that don't have no value and say that he has stolen them and he has concealed them and he had purposes that weren't assigned that were proper, that he had motives other than, motives that were, rational.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Let me ask you, Jorge, what part of Brooklyn are you in?
I'm over here in Park Slope.
Okay, cool. I grew up right outside of Flatbush in Midwood, so I'm a Brooklyn guy. Big shout out to Brooklyn, and you too, Jorge. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Let us continue. Let's go on to Kim. She's calling from Michigan on KDKA Online. Go right ahead, Kim. Go for it.
Hi, Rich. I'm calling about what you were talking about, what they're doing to President Trump, and it's endless. This people need to look close. This is what communism looks like. This is what Banana Republic stuff looks like. and we're hip deep in it in Michigan. We've got 3 women running our state that have, well, to give you an idea, a lot's hit the fan in the last couple weeks. The 16 alternate electors that I believe it's that Electoral Count Act allows, if there's malfeasance, then they can send it back to the states, which way they were doing in all these states where all the cheating happened. Those people were arrested in Michigan by our Attorney General. 16 of them, and most of them are over 70 years old. They were doing what the Republican Party authorized them to do. They said there's too much malfeasance, take your Republican vote, your elector vote, and it was in the Constitution. And that's not all. It also hit the fan that in 2020, when President Trump got scammed out of his election, a company, it's a 3-letter company, BG, it's 3 letters, and they're an election fraud outlet. They're all over there in a number of states. Well, I'll tell you real quick what they did. In 2020, one of their operatives brought in over 10,000 fraudulent ballots and dropped them off in Muskegon, Michigan, a town of 40,000 people. This person, this operative, dropped off 10,000 votes that all had the same handwriting, and they were the clerk of Muskegon County called the state police of Michigan, and the police officer took a report, and she said, this person just came in and dropped off 10,000 ballots, tried to, and our Attorney General did nothing for 2.5 years.
I don't remember that story per se, and we'll double check on it, but I will tell you that the Attorney General in Michigan, she's a real character. I mean, she's famous for saying a lot of silly things. And I got to take a quick pause here, Kim, but thank you for the call and the update on what's going on in Michigan. We'll definitely pay a little bit of attention to that as well. And, folks, we're going to get to the rest of your calls. San Francisco, Chicago, and the rest of America calling in 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Call Springer, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, welcome back, and we're going to continue our discussion. Of course, the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I'm at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. I want to share a story with you, a little bit off the beaten path here. Because, they ban things. They're always banning. They're banning this. They're banning that, right? Earlier we talked about how they're banning the words boys and girls or ladies and gentlemen in New Jersey school curriculums. But another thing they're banning now is clothing. Yep, not a certain type of clothing, all clothing. They're banning clothing on a beach that is a nude beach. So if you have clothes on, you can't go on the beach. Why? Because the nudists are triggered by your clothes. Yes, this is true. This is a real thing. This is happening in Spain. Nudists in Spain want people to stop wearing clothes on the beach, and they're even asking the government to do something about it. The Naturist Nudist Federation of Catalonia sent a letter to Catalonian officials asking them to address the discrimination that nudists face on the beaches of Catalonia. The group is hoping to protect the decades-long tradition that's linked to about 50 of the beaches in the region and has made potential requests, including signage for nude beaches and a public awareness campaign for naturism. Let's see here. Simon Rovira is the head of the Naturist Nudist Federation of Catalonia. He told the outlet in an interview that before people would arrive at a nude beach and either leave or strip, they must know the rules. Here's a quote. He says, now they stay and they keep their swimsuit on, but they don't realize that if there is a lot of them, they end up making us uncomfortable. It's a lack of respect. Now, a big part of what led to this invasion is social media and tourism, with travel bloggers and influencers putting a spotlight on some of the nicest and most secluded beaches, but omitting that these are nudist beaches. In other cases, the beachgoers know about the nudist nature, but choose to ignore it anyway. And again, many beaches, like in New Jersey, there's nude sections, but it's clothing optional, right? It's not like if you're wearing clothes, you can't come to the party. You know, you can't be at that part of the beach. So I just think that's crazy. So they want what they're calling zona nudista, nudist zone. And they want that to be posted and enforced. You know, so imagine, you know, you're there, you're wearing your bikini, you're tanning, and all of a sudden, or for gentlemen out there, you're wearing your Speedos or your trunks, and Baywatch comes and says, excuse me, sir, you're wearing too much clothes. You either have to strip butt naked or you got to get out of here. Just imagine that being a thing. So many people going to the beach this summer. I just can't imagine that actually ever happening. In New Jersey, it's more like, excuse me, what's in that brown bag? You know, what's in your cooler? Do you have alcohol with you? That's the type of policing they do around here. But I could not imagine that being the case anywhere else. Anyway, I'd love your comments on that. If you want to give me a call on that, let me know if you think they should enforce nudity on the nude beach by government decree. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to David in San Francisco. David, you're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, Rich. Talking ocean, I guess I'd tie it with that nude beach issue. When I first moved out here...
Let's start with that, if you don't mind. David, I know you're streaming us online, and I appreciate you listening to the show. Tell me, what do you think the government should be involved in enforcing nudity on the beach?
Well, I was going to give you an anecdote that was similar. I was out at the nude beach, and I was naked, and there were some creeps up on a cliff, very steep hill, and people would point at them out, and they were trying to get them to stop photographing, and they had this huge telephoto lens, and they were just getting their rocks off, taking pictures. So, athlete that I was, I took off up that hill, got up to them, took that $1,000 camera and threw it down the cliff. Boy, those guys were crying about it, and, let them sue me, you know. So, they weren't, if they were to ask for my ID, well, I guess I had in my pants.
It was the naked guy in San Francisco.
Yeah, you'll find him, yeah. And I'm glad you got rid of the woman that was trying to allude that there was another election machine company that was corrupt. You could have walked yourself into $1 billion lawsuit by letting her yammer.
She was saying it, not me. But again, we'll always check those. I think what she was saying was there was like a like what they call like the white hat hackers, like somebody who was trying to test the integrity of the system by depositing those things, not actually depositing them. But I will get the facts of that story to clarify, because you're right. We definitely want to make sure we're 100% on the issues. And she's usually pretty accurate on everything. But go right ahead.
Well, regarding the coral reefs down in Florida, this is deadly serious. The waters down there have gotten over 100. And it's basically like stagnant water in the part of the Gulf that the fish go to spawn. And the coral reefs down there have been dying year by year, and they're down to the 2% range of what they were 100 years ago, down to 2%, and now it's cooking hot in there. So the fish in the Gulf of Mexico have basically got nowhere to spawn. And if they die this year, or if they die back 50%, 70%, 80%, the remainders will still have to find a spawning ground, and will they be able to spawn? Or will it be cooking again next year? So this is such a dead serious issue. I mean, this is... I spent the last weekend calling up shoreline areas and asking if they had some way to plant sod, at least some sort of an artificial grasses along the shores. And if you look at Florida, most people want a clean, pristine beach with no grass.
Listen, no matter where you are, whether Florida or anywhere else, everybody wants a nice beach. David, I'm sorry. Don't hate me. I got to take a pause here because the clock doesn't wait for either of us, but I appreciate it, and I'm going to give you my response on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
All right, so quickly to address what David was saying, it's a two-part, I think, issue and a response. But the NOAA just put out some information, I don't know, let's see, a little while ago, where there was some claims that July was the hottest month and that the spike was caused by atmospheric CO2 rising from 0.42 to 0.422. But there was no warming since 2015. And in fact, they're saying that now July 2023 is only, in the U.S., it's only been the 11th warmest month since 1895. There are 5 warmer Julys in our history. So that is not entirely accurate. It's not the hottest. Now, as far as dead zones for coral reefs, this happens around the world. And scientists have been looking at this stuff for a long time. And I don't want to get into a whole lot of this, but apparently, based on the analysis of Nancy Knowlton and some others, they claim that this is not even one of, they call this hypoxia, where there's low oxygen in the reef, that it's not even mentioned in most of the important academic research they do, that there's plenty of other reasons that coral reefs die. Now, that doesn't change the fact that we want to keep them alive, but it's not necessarily man-made climate change. Anyway, I hate to do this to you, Jim, but you got like 20 seconds. Go right ahead. Chicago, go.
Well, I appreciate it. Praise the Lord, Rich. And I really appreciate you and Jim. And
thank you, brother.
And everything like that. But I love the Patriots. But you know what I have? I got a way to prove elections.
You know what? I don't want to cut you too short. If you got a way to prove the elections, I promise you call back tomorrow. We'll get you back in. The music kicked in quicker than I thought it was going to. Forgive me for that. Shame on me. But I appreciate you, Jim. Big shout out to you. God bless you. You are a patriot. WKAN in Kankakee, Illinois. Folks, take care, good night, and God bless. Hasta la próxima. I am Rich Valdez.